Recipes for Grief, heartfelt storytelling for feely foodies. I'm your host, Andrea Sexton Dumas. Today on the podcast, we're joined by Melanie Sheckels, who I actually met on Instagram. We always have really sweet exchanges with one another on IG, and this conversation is no different. She shares the origin stories of some of her dearest food rituals, including a soup mailing list. One thing that I didn't follow up on, but I wish I had, is her Papaw's cast iron pan. Shout out to all the cast iron enthusiasts out there. Melanie Sheckels is a registered nurse and a death, grief, and trauma educator and guide, helping hundreds of humans move from fear and freeze into possibility and ease. Melanie founded Threshold Doula in 2019 after 7 years as a cardiac and hospice nurse, helping people navigate the healthcare system and dying process with greater understanding and confidence. She believes that death is a sacred rite of passage, not a medical event. Even amidst great loss and difficulty, we each contain an inherent, unbreakable blueprint of health and wholeness that we may return to with deep, consistent care and connection. Melanie, how have you been sleeping recently?
Thank you for asking me this. I have been sleeping, I don't know, like I've been getting good sleep. It's like it's broken up into chunks. I have chronic pain in my back, so I toss and turn a lot. And I'm also a vivid dreamer. And so I will sometimes like wake up in the middle of the night and be like, okay, now I have to go write this down, or like feel like there's a lot happening in my dream. And sometimes my dreams feature my ancestors. Sometimes I'll be like kind of like solving some sort of problem in my dream, and I'll wake up and I'll be like, oh, this is okay, now I understand how to do this thing. And so I'll get up and write and then go back to bed. And so that's very much how last night went. I woke up in the middle of the night. I was up for a couple of hours and then I went back to bed. It works a lot better when I just normalize that and I don't try and like fight it.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel rested even though you've been like you might have these chunks of sleep and these chunks of awakeness? Do you wake up feeling rested?
Sometimes I do. Today I definitely do because I was able to sleep in a little bit later. But if it's on a morning when I have to like get up and go right to work, then I might want to come home and take a nap later.
Yeah, I'll share this with you. So we've been making pizzas on Saturdays. We've never made pizza before, and we've started, making our own dough, and so it's become this ritual and routine. I have a feeling you probably experience this as well, but like sometimes my dreams, like it's very clear to me that I'm like in a different place. Like it's not just a dream. I've been in classrooms, I've communed with people, and a couple of nights ago, I had a dream. It was like a heaven kitchen. Like the restaurant was crowded, but we in the kitchen were not rushing. We did not feel like panicked about this, and I was practicing making pizza dough. I'm like, "Oh, I'm actually practicing making it. Like I know this happened for sure." Like,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Like there was no big rush to get the pizza out. So did you ever watch The Good Place?
Yes. Love
That's
show.
what it felt like. It's like time doesn't exist. Everything is fine. And I have a restaurant full of people who want pizza, and I am here to practice making dough.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I will just say, in a little snippet that I learned how to ride a bike and how to ski in my dreams.
Get out.
Like it was a thing that I had practiced and was not getting. And then I went to bed, I dreamt it, and then the next day I could do it without a problem. It was just like, oh, like I felt like I learned the like body like rhythms and moves in my dream. My grandfather has been coming to me in my dreams more lately. And he is this really like kind of like a little mean, a little like funny, like kind of hard working, hard living hillbilly man, proud hill man. And he definitely didn't experience a lot of safety as a child. It was never really safe to like play. There was frequently not enough food to eat. And, it definitely wasn't safe to be curious about uncertainty, So, but he's been showing up in my dreams more lately with like this desire for like play. And and like like wanting to like sing and dance and kick up his heels, and so that's been really sweet.
Wow.
Yeah,
that is so sweet. Is this Papaw?
Yeah, this is Papaw. Yeah.
Oh.
Milas Kendrick.
All right. So let's get into it. Tell me about his sausage gravy.
Oh my goodness. So this is something that he cooked. It was like he had a few meals that he would consistently make for us. And that was one of them. My cousin Jessica was also like my sister. We both grew up, like my grandparents took care of us pretty regularly because my mom worked a lot. So he would make us the sausage gravy, like, especially on weekends. It was definitely like a very special treat. And I have this memory of like, I don't know, maybe like a Saturday or a Sunday, him making this. And it was a time when we would have breakfast and life would really slow down a little bit. And so I would remember like, sometimes I would go back and there would be a little extra in the skillet and I would just like get a little bit more, so we weren't like rushing off to like work and school and whatever else. So it was just a really special treat. And he would have like this old coffee can beside the stove. And so anytime he would cook any sort of meat, he would pour the grease from the skillet into this coffee tin and save it. And so then when it was biscuits and gravy time, he would take a scoop of the lard and plop it in the cast iron skillet, which I have his cast iron skillet. It's my prized possession. And so he would plop that big scoop in there and then, stir in the flour, whisk it in and brown it, and then add the milk. And, if it was a real good day, there would be extra sausage that he would cook along with it. So there would be like little chunks in there, some little patties on the side. At this point in life, he was able to get the biscuits that came in the little like tin. So he wouldn't make them from scratch as much anymore because it was like such a luxury to have these like partially made biscuits. And it was just so delicious. Like, oh my God. So like rich and like comforting. And you just like take a bite and your body just like sinks in.
I know that feeling.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. How old were you when he died?
He actually just died a couple of years ago.
Really?
He was such an ornery old coot. He hung on until the very last. So he was 93 when he died. And he honestly, like, this man lived a real hard life. And he lived such a long and full and in many ways healthy life. He chewed tobacco and smoked cigarettes and drank Canadian Club, like right up into the day that he died. And like in the very end, he had cancer. Let's see, I want to say he ended up getting some prostate cancer that metastasized to his bones. And he was also just super stoic and hated going to the doctor. My family historically had very little faith or trust in doctors. That's where you go to get sick, not where you go to get better. So he, I think, probably lived with a lot more pain than we ever knew about. But in the last like 6 months of his life, his pain got high enough that he was not able to tolerate it. And so, he let people know. He said, "This is too much. I do need to go to the doctor now. I need help." And, he went on hospice, and not very long after they got him comfortable with morphine, he died. And he told us, he said, "I'm ready to go. I've lived a long life. I've been able to care for my cousin Jessica, who was his granddaughter. I cared for my granddaughter until she died. I cared for his wife, my grandma, Catherine Irene, Rena. I cared for Rena until she died. I've raised a huge family. I feel at peace with my life. I'm ready to let go." And what was really, I feel so grateful for, is that a couple years before he died, my mother became sick and she died. And they both lived in North Carolina. I'm in Illinois. So I was traveling to North Carolina quite a bit to like administer her estate and deal with like all the legal and the property and things like this. So on some of those trips, I got to spend time with him. And there was one of my last trips to North Carolina. I remember sitting with him in his trailer, and he was like sitting in his recliner, and he normally was not a big talker. He's the kind of guy where if you get on the phone with him, you'll be lucky if you get 3 minutes before he's like, "All right, girl, I got to get off this damn phone. I got shit to do," And so, but this day he was like, maybe it's because we had just lost my mom. He was real grounded and tender and loose jawed. So he told me so many stories. And I just I sat at his feet. There's not a lot of places to sit in his home, but I sat at his feet and just listened to him telling stories. And my inner child felt so seen and so healed in this way of that part of me that always needed an elder to really sit with me and tell me about what their lives had been like, was just so held in that moment. And I had this knowing that this could be one of my very last times with him. And so when I left and I went home from that trip, I just felt so much peace with our relationship of what an incredible gift that I never knew I needed. And I never knew I would ever receive. I never in a million years would have imagined that my Papaw would become so open and tender with me. And so I actually got to see him one more time after that. And that was just the icing on the cake. He was not as, that tender window had closed. But, he was kind of back to his, he likes to kind of just tell mean jokes and shoot the shit in a way that, when we're told that boys in school making fun of us is them showing us their affection and their that they like us or whatever. That's my Papaw in a nutshell. That's the way that he's learned to express his love, is through kind of mean jokes. And so, I took that for what it was. And in some ways it was comforting to see my Papaw in a state of normalcy for him. I won't say that that's his essence really, because his essence is so much more than that. But
oh my gosh. I really just want to thank you for, setting that scene of you as an adult sitting at his feet, having your inner child's needs met, hearing the stories of an elder's life. Like, we really do need that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. Um, so yes, my grandmother also had that coffee tin.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, did he have like home remedies that he would use? Like, for example, so my grandmother in her later years had congestive heart failure, so she wasn't supposed to have salt, but she would bless the food with salt. She'd make the sign of the cross with salt over the pot, and it was medicinal salt at this point. I'm, I'm wondering, did your grandfather have, some medicines that he was using?
Oh, absolutely, he did. I first learned about some plants from him. He had mint growing outside of his house in Maryland that he had dug up from Kentucky and brought to his home in Maryland, and would use mint for everything. I think partially because it was a plant that was from his home, that it in particular had so much power and meaning that if that mint was going into it, it was like something near and dear to his heart was being threatened in some way. So he was like putting the medicine of his home into it. And then he would always just tell me like real stuff that I believed so fervently when I was a child, and then went through a phase of like, oh, that's just Papaw telling his lies again. But he would like grab like a little sprig of something and be like, here, rub this on your skin. It'll make your freckles go away. And so it was a little bit of that mean sense of humor.
Right.
But also, he was a freckled, red-haired man too. And so he knew that I got made fun of a lot for my skin. So he was like both giving me a hard time and like that was how he showed his love.
Yeah. I see you. I see you in me.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you make his gravy?
I do. I do. Yeah. So there was another time where, gosh, it was maybe 10 years ago or more. It was a while ago, but I was back visiting in North Carolina, and I've always been sort of a black sheep in my family. So I think part of me was like, I may not be welcomed here again. And I don't know how often I'll come back. Like, I don't know how often I'm going to desire to come back and be in this space now that I'm an adult with a driver's license and I can get the heck out of here. So, but I somehow got this little video camera. It was like so it might have been more than 10 years ago because it was before we had like video on our cell phones. And he was making his sausage gravy. And I was like, Papa, I'm going to record you making this gravy so that I remember it forever. Well, I lost the tape. I moved around a lot. I lost the tape. And so for a while, it kept me from even trying. I was like, oh, I lost it. I can't do it anymore. But then in the past few years, I've really developed a strong relationship with my ancestors and just like a lot of kind of devotional practices around staying in relationship with them. And so I just decided just to try it, from memory. And I feel like I know in my bones how to make this gravy. And there were a few times where I really had to like be like, oh no, the flour's getting like too crusty or like it's cooking too fast. But now it just feels like second nature. And it's, oh man. Yeah, it's just it feels so good in my body and my bones to like stir grease and flour around that skillet. Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. I have so many avenues I want to travel down. So first I have to ask, do you get the pre-made biscuits? Do you make your own?
I like to make my own biscuits. I won't let that keep me from eating a biscuit though. If
Yes.
I don't have the time or the patience to do it, I'll get the little like pop open ones. But I love to make my own biscuits. They are just so good. And I eat them and I think of my Papaw. There's another story about a biscuit that we can talk about another day or
We can talk about it today if you want.
Well, I mentioned that there were a lot of times when he didn't have food, and he was also Irish Catholic family, big family, one of like 14 kids. Some of them died of things like dysentery, things that we think of as like deep history, as like so far from us, but his siblings, life was not promised. And I've heard stories from him and from his kids about times where in the winter they didn't have any food and he had to like dig through the snow to find like little spring onions and things to eat, things that his mom could put in a soup, And so he told us this story one day, and I saw him cry for like the second time in his whole life that I've seen. He was about 90 years old when he shared this story, but he told us about this time when he was 5 years old and he was getting ready to go to school, and there were biscuits on the stove and he stole one and he stuck it in his pocket and he went off to school and he ate that biscuit and he carried shame about stealing that biscuit until the day that he died. And we told him, Papa, it's okay. You were so hungry. You needed that biscuit. It's okay that you did that. And he was like, you don't understand, because I stole that biscuit. Someone else went hungry and they might not have survived because I made that choice. And like, I don't know, that was just a really visceral understanding of the kind of poverty that led to so many of the harmful family dynamics that I revolted from, And so those are some of the lessons that I got later on that allowed me to forgive my family and to turn my anger towards the systems, I guess, in a very simple way.
A very big way. I'm thinking about every time you eating that biscuit for the kids who didn't get their biscuit that day, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah, no, I feel that.
Wow. Oh,
I definitely feel that when I eat a biscuit of any kind, whether I made it or Red Lobster made it. I'm like,
okay, thank you for bringing up the Red Lobster biscuits. So was this you and your mom's thing to have the Red Lobster biscuits? Tell me about this.
Oh my gosh. Well, my mom was like, it was the 80s. She was like this like fiercely independent, hardworking single mom, and she was out there doing the thing. And she didn't cook a lot. I think that for her, it was like such a luxury to not have to cook. And so we ate at McDonald's a lot. Like we ate cheap fast food whenever we could. But on special occasions, we would go to Red Lobster and we would eat all the biscuits they would bring us. And my mom was like such a little like advocate. She'd be like, could you please make sure that you're bringing us like the fresh biscuits and not like the cold ones?
Thank you, Mom.
I know, bless her.
Yes.
And then at the end of the meal, she'd be like, can we please have an extra bag of biscuits to go? Thank you.
Yes.
And then we would split a Caesar salad. And then we would split like this like brownie that had vanilla ice cream on top of it. And that would be our whole meal. And it was strategically like we bought like the cheapest things on the menu and ate as much of the free thing as possible. It was the best. Like it made us feel like royalty. And it was just like delicious and fun and such a special treat. And so, yeah, now whenever I eat Red Lobster biscuits, sometimes I'll get those boxes from the grocery store and make them. In September is the anniversary of her birth and her death. And so I've started, like, I'll get Red Lobster biscuits and put them on the altar and eat some. And, sometimes I'll just eat those, I'll get a bag of those biscuits and just eat biscuits all day.
Those are the best days. Just eat carbs all day. I really want to talk about your mom's cucumber salad that you found in the refrigerator.
Yeah.
But before that, if you would be willing to speak on, you've mentioned it a couple times, the relationship with your beloved dead and the relationship with your ancestors. This is becoming more common in pop culture. I'm kind of seeing it everywhere now, as opposed to just in my own small little private relationships and conversations. Can you share more about how you have built that relationship and your offerings and your gifts and your altar?
Yeah. So this is not a practice that I was like fully raised with. There are like little threads of that practice that I was raised with, where, like, I remember being like 4 years old and we were at my Papaw's mother's funeral. Hester. We were at Hester's funeral. And I remember, like, there was like this big storm that came through, like a big gust of wind. And my grandmother, like, whispered, like, out the side of her mouth to me and my cousin Jessica, like, that's Hester. She's here with us. She was saying it in that way because, like, we're Catholic and we're not supposed to talk about these things, believe this way, experience the world in this way. And so it was discreet. It was like a little bit like taboo or naughty that she was naming this. But it was a theme that would come out, like, in private family moments every so often over the years, when the subject of someone who died came up. Grandma, aunties, Jessica would say, like, oh, like, they still talk to me, and so it was a thing that I knew about but didn't necessarily perceive it yet. And then I remember my papa would always take me to visit people's graves and to bring food to their graves. And so that was something that always stuck with me, like, especially when my grandma Nanny had died, we would bring like a cup of 7-Eleven coffee and a chocolate eclair, and just different things that she had loved, and sit it on her grave. And maybe we would, if it was a nice day, we would have a picnic and hang out and kind of like talk to her a little bit. But then, when my mom died, I started experiencing it in a very different. That's when, like, the rubber met the road, I guess. And there were all of these really, like, profound, stark moments where I knew that she was with me. Like, one time it was a few months after she had died, and I was just kind of reckoning with all the ways that I was living grief, really, all the ways that my life, that there was like this dissonance or like discord between the life that I was living and the life that I wanted to be living, and the ways that I saw myself like reliving some of these same patterns, in terms of, like, abusive relationships with men and with work and other things like this. And so I had gone on a trip to visit people that I loved, and I just remember everywhere I went, I felt such richness and such belonging. I felt so alive in a way that I hadn't in a really long time. And I was visiting my uncle, who's like a parent to me in many ways. And I had borrowed his car, and I was going to the mall. I was going to go get a manicure and a pedicure. And the radio was off. I was singing Diana Ross, I'm Coming Out, because my mom loves that song so much. And it just connected me with this part of her energy that was like, I'm coming out. Like, I'm not gonna like dim my light anymore. I'm gonna be fully expressed. And so I was singing it and I was feeling her. And I got to the mall, I parked my car, turned off the engine, get out of the car. The speakers at the mall are like playing music that's like blasting by the entrance. And it's like seamlessly, the song that I was singing like is picked up on the speaker. So like I did not miss a beat. It was like, I'm coming out. I want the world to know. Got to let it show. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
And I just got full body chills. I was like, she's here with me. And like as I moved on, like from that direct experience, I was just like, she's showing up strongly when I'm paying attention to my body, to like how I move through the world, to how I feel in response to different relationships. Like she is here with me and she's guiding. And so there were so many experiences like that really like I could follow this thread, towards like what felt like our healing, including like I came back home from this trip and I immediately fell back into this pattern of dimming. And I was in, a relationship with work and with a man that were both really compressing my vitality. And I had started creating this garden in my backyard that was in memory of my ancestors, in honor of them. I was planting things that they loved in it, like flowers that they loved. And, I had like a little angel from my mom's garden that I put in there. And my aunt got me this stone that had engraved something on it like, dear mom, like you're gone from our sight, but always in our hearts. And so I put that in there. And I was really unhappy. And there was a point where I was like getting home from work before my significant other at the time. And I was like pouring myself like a ball jar glass of boxed wine and just going out into the garden. And I went out into the garden and this giant stone that I have upstairs, I swear to you, it fell from the sky and it landed on this plaque, this stone that was engraved to my mom, and the stone shattered into a million pieces. And I was like, okay, you're right. This is not working. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do something different now.
Mothering from beyond.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so the relationship has grown so much more intentional since then. Mm-hmm. I bring offerings. I come out and bring my lunch out to I live very far from the cemetery that my Papaw and grandma are buried in. And I made the choice to cremate my mom and bring her home with me. So I've spread some of her ashes back there and like locks of my cousin's hair and foods that they love and flowers that they love. And like I decorate it with crystals. And I get real intuitive and witchy with it. Like sometimes I'll be in the garden and I'll just be like, I'll feel this pull to like, oh, the new moon is coming. Like I'm about to start bleeding. I'm going to bring my first cup of my blood out here and pour it and just like spend time here under the dark moon and listen. I swear the more that I feed that relationship, the more that it feeds me and guides me.
Mm-hmm. Please tell us about the cucumber salad that you found in your mother's refrigerator after she died.
To kind of set the stage for that a little bit, my mom and I had a very hard relationship. I was legally emancipated when I was 15. And there were many years where we didn't talk at all. And so when she died, I wasn't just losing her, but I was losing the relationship that we never got to have. But also for the earliest memories of my life with her, she was such an incredibly devoted mom. She was so present with me and so loving and attuned. But then something shifted and she became very depressed and withdrawn and, got deeply involved with men and with drugs. And I lost her. So when she went into the hospital for the last time, we had not spoken in a year. And in that time, let's see, just before that previous year, her husband had died. And her husband was my stepfather. He was like, in some ways, I felt like he was the person that she left me for. He was the love of her life, but also like deeply troubled, wounded, and violent man. And when he died, she was at first extremely lost, but then I found this out when I got to her house after she died. But she had gone on to create this whole new life for herself. This it was like the essence of my mom I could really see in this home that she had built. After so many years of struggling to have stability and to feel loved and seen by this man, she finally had started to create stability and peace in her life. I remember so vividly and so tenderly walking through her home and seeing what a beautiful place she had created for herself, and just feeling this sense of like, wow, like she was really creating her dream here. It was brand new. Like she had moved into that house within this past year. It was full of like new things. She had inherited a little bit of money from him. And so she was like, Diana Ross, I'm coming out, y'all. I'm making the home of my dreams here. And so I just like was so struck by the potential that I sensed in all that this place really like meant to her, all that felt possible for her here that wasn't possible for her before, and this deep grief that she wasn't able to soak up the fruits of her labor. And so as I was moving through her house, I was just like looking through her cupboards, and she was a very sick woman. Even at this point, she had end-stage heart and lung disease. And so her mobility was really compromised. But she had like a perfect row of like canned soups and like pre-made easy meals that she could just like have very easily for herself. And everything was like lined up like it was like in a grocery store. It was all like very like perfect. And I opened the refrigerator, and there is this little Tupperware of this cucumber salad that she had made herself. And it was like, something that she would have made and brought to a potluck back in our early life. And I just saw it there, and I just like felt all of this potential of her. And I felt like, I don't know, the power of this food, this last meal that she had made with her hands. And I opened it up, and I could smell that it was not good anymore, that it was rotten. And I felt like, in that same way that I feel like an intuitive call to like be in relationship with this land and my ancestors, I knew that I had to eat it. I knew that I wanted it to be a part of me. And so I ate that whole little tuppy full of cucumber salad. And it's one of those things that just like the sight of it, the smell of it just like brings me right back to that place and that feeling. And I never want to lose that.
Yeah.
It was definitely very fermented.
Do you still make that cucumber salad recipe?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Would you be willing to
Yeah.
share what's in it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so simple. It's like just a little of like the cucumber that has the seeds in it.
Mm-hmm.
She put a little bit of like grape or cherry tomato in it, just like in little quarters.
Mm-hmm.
And she had quartered the cucumber salad. So she sliced them into rounds and then cut them, in a cross. And then like thin little slivers of red onion. And there is like a hint of sugar and just a little bit of what I'm guessing was apple cider vinegar. Just very simple, a little salt, a little pepper.
Tell us your mom's name.
Pamela.
Pamela.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
Mm-hmm.
sharing that story. And I want to thank you on behalf of all of your clients, past, present, and future, because you do something for them that when I read this in our email exchange, I just started bawling. Um, you give them the gift of that feeling from the cucumber salad. Please tell us what you do.
Yeah. So I was so touched by that experience that I really it struck me like how visceral that relationship is with food and emotion and memory. And so I was like, oh, this is like such an important, like nonverbal way of connecting with that experience. And when a family is like kind of huddled up around their dying loved one, it's kind of like we're putting out fires. We're not like thinking about like, how do we honor this like really well? And what am I going to need a year from now? It's like we're just kind of getting through this, putting our heads down and getting through. And so, one of the things that I can do for people as a doula is like, yeah, look around. Is there something that they made? I was at one of my best friends, her father died recently, and I was able to take a piece of cake and cut it and put it in a little Ziploc bag and seal it up and put it in the freezer, or preserve it in some way so that I can offer it to them later on an anniversary.
I have this image of your freezer just full of food for dead people, which is like this wonderful, comical, kind, image in my mind.
Yeah, I did invest in a little deep freezer for my basement. So I have some extra storage capacity, which is good because I have like a ridiculously small refrigerator and freezer upstairs.
It also just must be really nice when you go into your freezer, you're thinking about your clients and you're thinking about their
Mm-hmm.
dead.
Mm-hmm.
I have found in my work as a digital preservationist, when people bring me their photo albums or their VHS tapes, the dead want to be remembered. People
Mm-hmm.
will stand at the door and tell me stories, that they haven't talked about in a long time or they haven't thought about. I'm like, yeah, your dead want to be remembered.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you're going to remember the first anniversary, every anniversary, but that first one is often the hardest. But it's also just really sweet to think about you tending to your freezer, moving things around. I'm
Mm-hmm.
imagining you saying a, little blessing as you come
Mm-hmm.
across these things in your
Mm-hmm.
freezer, while they're at home grieving and going through that experience.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it does feel like a little bit of them is there with me.
And so, speaking of a little part of you that you give to your clients, we had an exchange on Instagram about your nanny's cabbage soup.
Mm-hmm.
I saw
Yes.
this story, and you had a mason jar with cabbage soup in it, and you said, if you're not on my cabbage soup mailing list and you want to be, let me know. I'm like, wait, what's happening? So tell us about this cabbage soup and how this came to be that you're making your nanny's cabbage soup for your clients.
Well, it started at least a year ago. I host these community grief rituals and grief like groups where we'll meet like every week or two and share. And I've been moving more and more towards like, I don't know, ways to continue these relationships with the folks who come. And like, so I might like have a grief ritual in the spring and then another one in the fall, and just invite the same people back rather than, opening it up to the whole world every time. And so what I did 2 years ago, I invited a group of people from my grief ritual over to my house for a potluck. It was the anniversary of my mom's death, and I wanted to just like bring some community and celebration and ceremony into that experience. I think for many years, hard anniversaries really just kind of snuck up on me and clobbered me. And so in this season of life, I love to bring like intention and ritual and relationship into them. And so I invited my friends over for this potluck, and I made a big pot of my grandma's cabbage soup. And it just felt like the right food for the time. It was kind of a cold September. And they all loved it so much that now when they get sick, they ask me, I'm like, do you want me to make you anything or bring you anything? And they're like, can you make me your grandma's cabbage soup? And so, now like when I might make it for me, I might just like notice that a bunch of people in my community are sick and be like, okay, it's time to make cabbage soup. Then I just like make a big batch and I'm like, okay, who needs to be on the soup train? So I just love that it's become this thing that has a life outside of my, immediate family, that like there are people in my community that are like, I really need that soup. Yeah. And I really feel this and some of them have expressed this to me before of like, I don't have ancestral recipes. Mm-hmm. And so it feels really special to me that I get to experience that through your grandma's soup, Nanny's cabbage soup.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, my grandmother was a matriarch, so we would always have other people come to Sunday supper, people from church, the priest, the door. It was kind of like open door policy. And I recently had an experience with a friend's grandfather who is dead. I've never met him. He was living in India. But I had a dream about him. So I'm just realizing like, okay, this is going to be really out of left field, but I had this dream about this man. And so then my friend and I were talking about him. His name is Baji. We were talking about Baji, and I was doing a meditation because I wanted to know like, why is Baji popping up in my life? This is so extraordinary. And Baji was talking to me about oneness and how we're all connected. And he said, if I am Sim's grandfather, I am everyone's grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, yeah, your nanny is everyone's nanny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Aww. She's the surrogate for these people who've been disconnected from their families or their heritage or those recipes. She's like, well, come here. Let me love on you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that so much.
Me too. Bless the grandmothers, the grandfathers.
Bless the biscuits.
And the soil from which all of this comes. Right?
Yes. The soil is also grandfather, grandmother, ancestor.
I don't know if you have any food related stories, but you've brought up your cousin slash sister Jessica a couple times. I just wanted to know if you just wanted to maybe talk about her a little bit.
Oh, I would love to. um, can we take a quick bio break?
Oh, by all means, yes, absolutely. Here, I'll pause our
We are.
recording. Okay, resume. Okay. There we go. Let's have a little waters.
Mhm.
I have a cat whose name is Banana, and one of his nicknames is Nanny. So, he was hanging out with me in the bathroom, and I'm like, Nanny. And I'm like, oh, Nanny. Okay, hey, girl. We're friends now.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Give Nanny a little scritch for me.
That's right. I sure will. I have to lock him out because he loves to be in the mix. So he would be like,
That's Nanny for you.
that's right. Like,
Nanny is in that mix.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. So Jessica.
Jessica. So Jessica is just such an incredible being. She's really had such a profound impact on my life. She was 5 or 6 years older than me. She was like my big sister, and she was diagnosed with neurofibromatosis, which is basically a form of cancer that kind of causes these fibroid tumors to show up in your brain. They can be kind of unpredictable, and the tumors themselves tend to be benign, but just by proximity, they can cause a lot of disruption. So she got this diagnosis when she was like 3 years old, and the doctor said that she would probably not live to be 5. And she lived to be 36. She was like, basically like, suck it, doctors.
That's right. Don't tell me what to do.
That's right. You're not going to tell me how much life I get. So she had this real sense of, of the vivid tenderness of life, that it is not promised. And she had this like zest, this like real like love of life and desire to live it to the fullest whenever possible. And she was raised by my grandparents, by Nanny and Papaw. And they were so protective of her. They were so like hyper vigilant. It's not safe for Jessica to do all these things that other kids do. She got bullied at school. They took her out of school. One of her favorite things in the world was eating crabs. We lived in Maryland. She wanted to eat crabs whenever possible. She wanted the picnic table covered in like the rolls of paper and just like steamed crabs as far as the eye can see. And she's just like up to her elbows in like crab guts. And we're just picking them all day long. Loves it so much. And some point, like she had some little like kind of inflammatory response, and the doctor said that it might have had something to do with crabs. And so our grandparents were like, no more crabs, no more crabs. So it was just like, they were like, we need to have as many limits as possible, so that you can be safe. And Jessica was like kind of the opposite of like, no, I need to like live as much as possible. I have a lot of life to live. And so when I got a little bit older and I could drive, we would get together and she would be like, okay, Melanie, we're stopping by the bank. I'm taking out some money. We're going to go get tattoos. We're going to go eat crabs. And then like if we have extra time, we're gonna go like hang gliding or parasailing or something. Like she was just like, let's while out. Let's do all the things. And we did, like we did all the things. We would sneak out, and go meet boys at the mall and smoke cigarettes and not actually inhale them. But whatever, we were being bad.
And cool for the time.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, we were like, in some ways, like being children of the 80s, like that's what we thought like being like free adults that were like really alive would do, So yeah.
Wow.
Jessica was just so full of life, so much joy. She just deeply wanted to live what she perceived to be a normal life. She wanted to get married and have children and all of these things that she never really got to do. But yeah, whenever she did get out there, she made the most of it.
Sounds like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What a free spirit and free body.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you honor her these days? Like, are you doing some of these kind of wilder things?
I do some of the wilder things whenever I can. Some of the ways that I honor her are probably not exactly things that she would choose necessarily, but they're still honoring her in my capacity.
That's right.
Like, we never got to take swimming lessons. Someone in my Papaw's lineage died from drowning, and so it wasn't safe. That was not something that we got to do. And so I've taken adult swimming lessons and I've learned how to swim. We never got to go like learn how to roller skate. And so me and my nibbling went and did roller skating lessons last month. And I fell and hurt my wrist and was like, okay, maybe I don't need to roller skate. But, I keep trying. Yeah. And I went on this trip with my best friend in San Francisco to Maui. And, I went snorkeling and I hung out with turtles and all these things. And I really felt Jessica's presence there of like, yes, Melanie, we are out in the world. And I've done quite a bit of solo traveling actually, where like I took the train to New Orleans and I just, biked around the city and like I would like, go out to like a little blues club by myself and just like that. Those are times when I really feel Jessica's spirit, very strongly, like in my body. Like Jessica's like, hell yes, we're doing it.
Oh my gosh, I just love that. I can like feel that like cheerleading, like, yes, let's live.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing Jessica with us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for holding space for these incredible ancestors to get to live and breathe. And I love the way that you name that, like, oh, and like your grandma is also my grandma and everyone's grandma. And so naming them and bringing them alive in this space feels like I'm breathing life into them and like letting them be, like knowing them as a bigger part of the web of life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My grandmother would, when I left home and went to college, and, sometimes I'd come back and I had friends who were here from the Bay, and she'd always want them to come over. Like, she wanted to meet my friends, mostly to convince them to go to church with us. But, try to make them sit down and say the rosary or something, but like she really wanted to take them in if they needed to be taken in. And so that's, like when I think about grandmother, that's what I think about, this like all encompassing, like everyone is my little baby. Y'all just come hither and let me love on you.
Yes. What's your grandmother's name?
Alberta, but she went by, very old school, like no one's calling her Alberta. So you would have called her Mother Dumas.
Mother Dumas.
Yes,
Okay.
Mother Dumas. That's what everyone at church called her. Some people just called her mom or grandmother. She actually, this is a funny story. I tried calling her grandma, and she cut that shit down. She was like, "I am not your grandma. I am your grandmother." She was such a formal person, and she wanted to be called grandmother. And so, that's her title, grandmother, not grandma. And then, of course, as a young person, I wanted to give her a nickname. So I ended up with Grand Mimi. And then later she allowed me to call her Mimi.
Oh.
But she was like, "No, my name is grandmother. I'm not your grandma." Yeah.
Oh, I hear that. She's like commanding respect.
Absolutely. Put some respect on my name.
That's right.
Yes. Well, you've really spoken on this so well already. Knowing that we carry our grief in tandem with carrying our love, what is your life recipe for tending grief?
I think that there are a few ingredients that that I use pretty intuitively. One is walking beside people who are dying, because that keeps my body in this like felt sense relationship with impermanence. And so that helps me to like be like drop into presence from moment to moment, and remember like, oh, I can go slow and I can really be here and really feel how precious this is. How, you and I in this moment, like we've had this whole arc of our lives, and next week, everything could be different. And so how precious and beautiful and miraculous that we can be here right now. And I think that is, these different ingredients are very related, but being in relationship with my ancestors is definitely a piece of this. And doing that on purpose, and that helps me to stay in relationship with my grief and my love. I also think that, in a very fast-paced society that is like hyper individualistic and like hyper productive, I think that the society feeds off of us staying in a state of like heightened stress and being really reactive and just like bouncing through life like a pinball. And so I try to be very intentional about carving out space to integrate, to really slow down and just say to myself, like, okay, I'm digesting. What am I digesting? And then going into rest, which both from a physiological standpoint helps my nervous system to downregulate, but it also helps me it helps me expand my capacity to move through the world with an open heart. I think that without that, I can very easily move from love to like contempt, or from love to revenge, or resentment. And so that daily, even daily for like 5 minutes in the morning or the evening, like it doesn't have to be this whole big thing. Like, yes, I would love to go for a long walk in the forest every day, and that's not necessarily my life. So even just like what's like the smallest doable dose of integration that I can do in my car between appointments.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for your time. Thank you for joining me here today. I'm so excited and I appreciate all of the stories and the wisdom that you've shared. This has been really incredible. Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Recipes for Grief. You can find more information about today's guest on the podcast page of your player, as well as their recipe card that's available on my website, AndreaSextonDumas.com. That's AndreaSexton, D as in donut, UMAS.com. If you'd like to share your recipe for grief, leave a 3-minute voicemail at the following number, and your message may be played on a future episode as a listener shout out. That number is 510-426-6041. That's 510-426-6041. Find me on Instagram and TikTok at Recipes for Grief. And now, here's a little advice from my grandmother.
Life isn't easy. You just have to make the best of it.